Okay, it's starting up. Just making sure we're live. Okay, so we are live. Welcome everyone. This is the second week we're doing this webinar, which is basically a live demo of Marvin. So it's perfect if you are in a trial right now. Hold on, I have to turn off the sound. Otherwise I'm hearing myself. Okay, so yeah, if you just got started with Marvin, or you maybe just be curious to kind of check it out, what it's all about, this webinar will be perfect. And if you already saw the webinar from last week, it's basically the same, so you might want to wait an hour, because in an hour we're going to do a special topic webinar where we're going to dive deep into working with projects. So this is basically the same as last week, just shortened. So I'm Christina, and I'm the founder of Marvin, and in the background is Mark, the other founder, my husband, and he will be in the chat, so you can chat with him, and he will also see if you have questions, you can put it in the chat and he'll tell me, and I'll try to answer the questions. So if you are watching this live, I would be kind of curious to see who you are. If you are someone who's in a trial or just curious about Marvin, it'd be cool if you introduce yourself, but no pressure. So Marvin is actually pretty new. We are just sort of getting started. And this is a snapshot of things we have planned. We have a lot planned. So you actually joined at the right time. It's really exciting. We're making steady progress, and you can bring in sort of your own ideas of what you want to see in Marvin. And we're really always happy to hear suggestions from users and then kind of incorporate that feedback. So yeah, introduce yourselves in the comment. Would be really cool. And if you have just gotten started with Marvin and you've maybe used something else before to get organized, or you have never really had a digital system, Marvin might be a bit confusing at first, because it is very different than what's already out there. It has a very unique system. And I hope that at the end of this webinar, you'll have a really good idea of how Marvin works, sort of the basic core concept of how it works, which is what usually most people struggle with when they come from another to-do app, because it's different than other to-do list apps. Basically, Marvin is designed to help you find the perfect productivity system. And a productivity system is basically the set of processes that you use to get things done. And there's many different ways to go about that. And that's kind of what we're trying to help people with, to create an app that allows you to find that system without having to constantly switch apps, and that kind of allows you to set it up in very many different ways that wouldn't even be possible with a lot of other apps. So the way that Marvin does that, there's sort of two things that are very unique about Marvin and different. There's the core concept, which I'm going to go talk about more later, because it's really important to sort of grasp that, and the customizability aspect of it. The core concept is basically, like Marvin is basically a combination of a to-do list app and a calendar, but not in maybe the way that you would expect. And the customizability aspect of it is what you see right here. Marvin has a lot of different kind of features that you can turn on and off, and many of them you can customize. And this is how you will build sort of your system. And most of them are very specifically designed to solve a problem that people run into when trying to get things done. And so these are the two ways Marvin is different. And the main part we're going to talk about in this webinar is actually sort of this core system, because that's the first thing that you have to get. So the core system, like I already said, basically means that Marvin is a combination of a to-do list and a calendar. But it's not so obvious when you first start it because it doesn't actually have this typical calendar view that you're used to from maybe using Google Calendar or something like that. And why is this important and why do we need both? And don't they serve different purposes and why combine them? And ultimately, both of these have specific functions and are kind of limited. And a good system incorporates an aspect of both. The to-do list has a very specific purpose of helping you not forget things and sort of have a physical representation of the things that you have to do. And the calendar brings in the time aspect because ultimately you need time to get stuff done and you only have a limited amount of time each day and you have to try to map your tasks to your time. So we kind of need both things in one system because they're very closely related. So this is kind of how you can visualize it. There's things you have to do and time that you have, and you kind of have to map it. So if you just use a to-do list, it kind of lacks too much this time component because it's just a list of things you have to do. And actually, many people are very aware of this, although there are a lot of to-do list apps and a lot of people kind of use them and try to get things done with them. But yeah, productivity experts and a lot of people just sort of have tried to find a good workflow for a while. They do come usually to the conclusion that to-do lists aren't enough or they're not good for productivity, which is, a bit of an exaggeration because you still need them, but by themselves, they're very limiting and they can hurt your productivity. So if you just Google this, you'll find a lot of people talking about this very problem. The solution that they do always offer is that you should use your calendar and you should maybe schedule to-dos in your calendar, stuff like that. But if you just try to now use your Google Calendar and schedule tasks in there, you'll also find that it's that approach, that particular productivity system is quite limited and also has a lot of disadvantages. It doesn't work for everyone. That's why we kind of created something new that takes away the limitations of both. And in the webinar we did last week, I go into more details of this. But in this one, I just kind of want to show you a bit more, just Marvin. So yeah, we're actually going to go switch and to Marvin. So I can show you what I mean. So this is what you see when you first sign up. And this is kind of the calendar part. Because what you're looking at right now is actually a day. So instead of seeing, a week in your calendar or a month, maybe what you're used to, you're just seeing one day. And on the left, you can see what day you're on. And by default, it's today. So this is the calendar part. And the to-do list part, basically what most other apps have, is called the master list. And as the name says, this is your master list, meaning it contains all the things that you have to do or want to do. It's usually a combination of both. And the purpose of the master list is to get things out of your head so that you do not have to try and remember things. And it's so that you have a physical representation of the things that you have to do so you can kind of manipulate them and prioritize them and think about them, and because otherwise you would have to do that all in your head and that would be very difficult. So we're going to go over how to set this master list up because that's usually the first thing you want to do. You want to get the things you have to do into your app, of course, so that you can work with it. But just to illustrate again, the master list is kind of hidden, and this is by design because most of the time you won't actually be working directly from the master list. The master list is where you organize and you kind of do your planning activities and your thinking. And there's many ways to add things quickly to the master list, so to capture all the things you have to do. But when you work and you try to actually make progress on things, you will be in your calendar, basically. You will be focusing on one day at a time. And this will help with overwhelm, because why think about all the things you have to do tomorrow, next week, and next month when you are just trying to get work done? You should just focus on one day at a time. And how do we get tasks that we have in the master list into our day? And this is the process that we call day planning. And the word that we use to put tasks from your to-do list into your calendar is called scheduling. Just like you would, you schedule an appointment. You're scheduling your tasks. And we're going to go over exactly how to do that. But this is sort of the basic idea. So let's actually just start setting up the master list, because that's what you would do first when you start up Marvin and you want to get started with it. I already have some stuff set up here, but when you first come, you will just have the inbox, which if you do GTD or you are used to another app, this will be very familiar. Just kind of sort of where you can sort anything into that just comes in. Then you have these little buttons, and in this column, the very left, you first have to set up categories. In Marvin, we have basically 3 main items that you work with: categories, projects, and tasks. We're going to go over what all of these mean. But category is every time you have something with this little folder icon. There's not that much you can do with categories, but to help you organize things, just as a folder would, you try to group related things. So the first thing is you think about the kind of areas of your life and try to set up a folder, and then you can give them a special color. And so this color will be used all throughout Marvin. So you always kind of know this task belongs to this category. Sometimes people, kind of struggle with this step, and they maybe just feel like, well, there's work and there's personal. But you can usually break things down if you want. So personal, you might have household things like cleaning or paying bills or anything administrative. But personal is also maybe, our health or a hobby we have or things we want to learn. And it's usually a good idea to kind of try to break it down if we have enough tasks and projects for these categories. There's actually on our website a knowledge base that sort of has best practices that also walks you through this step by step. So then once you have your categories, you want to fill them, and you can fill them with tasks and projects. And tasks in Marvin is anything that has this checkbox here. And we say a good task is something that you can kind of complete in one session. So it's one step. You can sit down, look at the task, do it, and then you're done and check them off. And anything that takes you maybe multiple days or multiple weeks is usually a combination of multiple steps. And then you should group it in a project. That's classic GTD if you're familiar with getting things done. Anything that's multi-step should be a project. So I'm just going to show you what I've set up. So in Marvin, it's a really big category. So I kind of made subcategories as well to group things even more. And then inside of them, I have set up projects. Projects have flags. You can kind of remember it as a project is kind of a mountain of tasks that you're trying to conquer. And then when you've done all the tasks, you can put the flag at the top of the mountain, and your project is complete. And we're going to actually, in the next webinar that's going to come up in 45 minutes, really dive deep into projects and how to work with them. It's kind of a separate topic beyond the basics, but it's really, really important because most people really benefit from working with projects. So I definitely urge you to try and work with projects. And if it's something that you feel like, I don't really need it, well, obviously you can do, best what you need, but I highly recommend that you at least kind of check it out and think about projects a bit more. So once you have most of your tasks in here, or all of your tasks, the next step is to learn how to schedule them into your day. Otherwise, you won't be able to really work them off. And every time you hover over a task, you will see this little calendar icon. When you hover over it, it says schedule task. This is how you can move the task into a specific day. This is kind of like setting an intention that I want to do this task this date. And then the task will show up on that day, you scheduled it. And in the master list, the task will still show, but it will be grayed out. And when you hover over it, you can see that the calendar icon is colored, meaning this task is scheduled, so it's already somewhere in one of your days. And this is useful. And then you can hover over it and it will tell you for which day it is scheduled. Another way to schedule things is to go to this little plan day icon on the top right. And then you'll see your master list again, just small. And you can open all the projects and it will show you how many tasks are in it. So here we got 12 tasks somewhere. And then you can just drag them. You can't see my cursor right now, so it looks a bit strange, but technically you would see the task sort of dragging over here, and then you can just drag it in here and it's scheduled. And of course, if you decide, you know what, this is actually not something I have to do today or even soon, you can also unschedule it and it will just go back to the master list where it was before. So when a task is scheduled, and by the way, you can also close the sidebar to kind of get a really focused look. And so if these tasks now, they basically have a due date, a DO date, a date when you want to do them. This is very, very different from other to-do list apps where you most of the time only have a due date that you can assign the task, so a DUE date. And Marvin also has due dates, but if you want to use them differently. And basically, a due date is a deadline for a task. So a specific day where you need to have done that task or there will be some kind of consequences. And not every, project or task in our lives, especially if you're maybe self-employed or you have a lot of freedom over your tasks, has a due date. So then you shouldn't actually give it a due date because for planning what to do when, we have other strategies. And so when you use Marvin, I highly recommend you only use due dates when something actually has a real deadline. Otherwise, you will never really know anymore what really has a deadline. Marvin won't know, and it will just kind of become more complicated than it has to be. So the way that you assign due dates, so a deadline, is you can hover over, by the way, this is sort of a basic thing, like you hover over a project or a task, and then you have icons where you can do things with that project and icon. And depending on what features you have turned on, there will be more or less. But this edit cog icon is always there, and that's how you assign due dates. So here it says set due date, and then I can just, edit due date. And it will tell me underneath the title of the project or task when something is due, which is helpful. And if something is due very soon, so let's say it's due tomorrow, it will actually be red, so to kind of stand out. So yeah, this is the another important thing to just sort of understand the difference between due dates when you want to do something, when a task is scheduled, and a due date when a task has a deadline. Another kind of probably basic thing you want to do really early on, beyond setting up your tasks and importing everything here. By the way, we don't actually have an import function yet. So if you are switching from an app with a lot of tasks, I'm really, really sorry. But it's coming up. But I always say, try to sort of take this maybe as a chance to really kind of weed through it and figure out what's really important and what you really want to do in the next couple of months, and only import that. In general, sometimes our master list can get really, really long. And I always say the more things there are that we can do, the less we usually do, because we struggle with overwhelm and analysis paralysis. So sometimes it's a good idea to kind of have a separate list where you kind of keep things that aren't really current yet, things you aren't working on right now. And you can do that in a document app, but you can also do that inside Marvin actually. And this is something I'm going to talk about in the other webinar, but just to show you quickly, you can click on folder icons and flag icons and then sort of get this view where you sort of zoomed in on this specific category. And each category and project also has a note that's attached to it. And there you can basically write anything you want. And you can format it, you know, make it big, center it, underline it, anything. And so you could, you know, have sort of a list of projects, or maybe it's something like a tickler file for the specific category. For things that aren't quite current yet, but just sort of so that you have it written down somewhere. And then when you know when it's time to pick some new projects you want to work on, you can look at this list on the left to see what's there, and then, you know, just create projects right from here. That's just a little tip. So the other thing that's kind of like basic, I got sidetracked there, is the recurring tasks. So recurring tasks you can access at the top here, recurring items, or you can also just turn anything from here into a recurring task. So let's say in my household, actually I already made a bunch of recurring tasks, but here I have this category, it's cleaning plan. So here I want to store all the tasks to sort of keep my household in check. And as we all know, sadly, a household is never really done. It needs constant maintenance, right? So there's tasks that just come up again and again and again. So that's why I made it a category, because it's never, you know, going to be done, so I can check it off. And in here you see a bunch of recurring tasks, and recurring tasks look like this. They're grayed out because they're automatically scheduled for you. So if you say, I want to do something every Monday in your day view, the task will be there. So that's the kind of neat thing about the system of having a calendar and a to-do list, because it works really, really well with recurring tasks. Because it also won't create, you know, duplications and all that problems that you have when you just use due dates, and then, you know, it shows up in your list. But anyway, so let's say you can already see I have some nice recurring tasks set up there, but I'm just gonna make one that's kind of nonsensical, because it's kind of something we do anyway all the time. Clean the kitchen, right? So right now it's a normal task, but I want to do this daily. So I click on the edit and I turn this into a recurring task. So then I get these options of where I can specify the pattern for this task. And, you know, this I want to do daily, but you can also do something every X days or X days after completion. So it only creates the next task when you actually checked it off. You can also give it an automatic due date, because again, what you're specifying here with the daily, weekly, monthly is the DO date. So when the task will show up in your days. They don't have a deadline, but if they do have a deadline, you can still specify it and say, well, the deadline is, and then you turn this in a recurring task. And the last thing that we're going to talk about, which is a really, really important part, and by the way, we're only talking sort of about the basics right now, because there's obviously a lot to it, but, you know, one step at a time. No, actually, before we get to the important part, which is the strategies down here in the middle, just a quick mention about shortcuts. Shortcuts in the long run, you will probably need, or a lot of things will feel not as easy as they could be. And if you go to the top right menu on Help and Resources, you can click Shortcuts here, and it will show you the shortcuts to the right, which is really, really handy, and it will follow you everywhere. So even if I go to the master list, it will still be there until I click it away. We have a couple of global shortcuts, meaning they work anywhere. So you can be in any overlay and, you know, they will work here, the focus mode. And then we have task input shortcuts, which means when you are creating a task, or if you're editing is very simple, by the way. You just click on what you want to edit and, you know, change it. You can assign things to this task very quickly. Like, let's say right now this is stored in marketing, but I actually want to move it to resources. I can just use the pound to kind of assign it to a different category project. And the same thing is, like, if, you know, if something comes up, oh, actually I have to do this really urgently, I have to call this person, call my mom. I want to sort this in the structure I have set up in my master list. I just hit the pound and then file this wherever it needs to go. Well, actually, I don't really have a social thing yet, but I'm just going to put it into health, I guess. It will go there. And similarly, I can also, let's say I want to actually not do this today, but schedule it for tomorrow. I can use a plus to quickly assign it a due date, or I can just move it to next week. And same thing here, I can move anything. So now I move this to tomorrow. So shortcuts are really, really handy. Other neat shortcuts are the back and forth arrows, so I can go to different days. So if I click the right arrow, I go to tomorrow. Now this is not as obvious when we don't have the sidebar. And then if I use Command or Control down, it always takes me back to today, which is the most important day. Okay, so that's the shortcuts. So let's get into the strategies. This is where you can really have a lot of fun. But also this is where a lot of people get kind of overwhelmed. You can see all the different things you can turn on and off, and each one of them will add something new to your Marvin, and many of them can be customized. And we're always adding more strategies here. So this is really kind of the key part, because ultimately how you find your productivity system is a series of trial and errors. You cannot just sit down and think about, oh, the perfect system, kind of design it in your head. You always have to actually try it and see if it works. And you have to be very aware of what pain points you run into, what things you struggle with, and then kind of get ideas for what you could tweak about the system to kind of alleviate that pain point and make it easier. And I'm going to create a lot of resources to help with that, where, if you just have an issue where you notice, I plan my day, but I never actually finish everything that's on there, where I recommend specific features that you can try to help with that problem. Similarly, we have these things that we call workflows, which are kind of, it's a journey. Like finding your productivity system is a journey, and it takes time. But you have to kind of be deliberate about it and think about it and play around. And yeah, I hope that, this doesn't overwhelm you, because I'm always here to help you. And, you have all the time in the world already. Even if you use Marvin without any of these strategies on, it's better than not having a system. And it's a very solid system already. And try to just have fun with it, because it's actually really easy to just turn them on and off. You don't have to design anything. It's usually just, a button that you push and then kind of go explore what it changed. And if you click on it, it will give you some ideas about how it works, and sometimes has a little tips of, how you could incorporate it into your workflow. And so yeah, try to have fun with it. And you can always ask me for help, because I'm really happy to help you find the right strategies. So I guess that's most of the basics. I think I did not forget anything. If there's anything that you're curious about, or your questions you have, you can ask in the comments. Are there any questions?
Audrey's having problems with the sync, but she sent us an email about that. And she also really likes the different strategies and how you can turn everything on and off.
Yeah.
I don't think there are any questions.
Okay. And anything else that anyone wants me to kind of cover? I mean, I have some time if anyone wants to hear more about a specific strategy or a problem already they've maybe encountered with their workflow, something that's difficult. Okay, I think we're gonna end it here. It was a perfect 29 minutes, much shorter than the last time. So yeah, and if you ever have any questions, you can email me at contact@amazingmarvin.com. And if you are a user, we also have a Facebook group. You'll get invited as soon as you sign up, and you can also always ask questions there. And we actually have a lot of sort of discussions about workflows. And if you found this helpful, you want to learn more about Marvin, we are doing webinars every week, or we try to. And this in half an hour, we're actually going to start another webinar that will go into working with projects. So if that sounds interesting, join me in half an hour